Hello, my name is Dan Hennen, and I'm here today with Greg Fernandez Jr. and Catherine Michele. We'll be providing updates with a little discussion here on the Crowley case. Today is July 31st, 2018, and it's been several months. So welcome, Greg, and welcome, Catherine.
Thanks, Dan.
Hey, Dan. So I think what we'd like to do tonight is just have a discussion and get caught up with the case. It's been a while. Everyone's been busy doing different things, and we haven't had a time to get all, I think, together, and we've had some requests to get updates provided, and I'd like to just get this recording out there and be able to publish this with some of the thoughts on the case. The other thing is we've got a lot of new members as well. So people are coming in at the ground level, entry level, and also there's also been many people here who's been here for several years. So I think it'd be a good chance to get caught up. Do you guys have any topic in particular to start off with?
No, not me. Catherine? I know you got something, Catherine. Come on.
I know. It's just like, where do we begin?
Where do you begin?
I was just talking to one of our other members today, and I'll be getting ready to do a video on this particular subject, but I wanted you guys to know and the listeners to know, I spend a lot of time at the library, and I just found another book that discusses exactly how crime scenes should be investigated. And everyone who is interviewed in this book, which I find really interesting, the vast majority have to remain anonymous. Nobody gives their name. However, their comments are still there. But I think it's going to give all of us some pretty good insight as to what should happen and what didn't happen, and then some of the things that they actually did do right. But I just kind of wanted to put that out there.
Do you know the title of the book?
Yes, let me get it. It is called Every Contact Leaves a Trace, and it is by Connie Fletcher.
Okay.
And it's actually... Yeah, it's to solve a crime, investigators know every contact leaves a trace, and it's actually really interesting. I remember I go back to the interview, Dan, you did with Russell, and there's one part in here I'm going to read verbatim from one of the other investigators, which it's almost verbatim what Russell had stated as well, that did not happen. But then there's also some things in here that either a detective or a crime scene investigator or an analyst or whatever, what they talked about, and they were things that actually did take place. So it's proven to be quite interesting, and I think it will help us a lot in understanding what did and what did not happen in the investigation process.
That'd be very good, and thanks, Catherine, for that, because that's very good. I would also like to start off too by making sure that everyone's on the same page here. That I know we do a lot of posts and commenting on the job of the investigators, and we know it's pretty obviously they didn't do. I'm not going to say their best, but this isn't also a chance to just rip on the Apple Valley Police Department. I think that they potentially did what the best they could do. I do believe they were in over their heads. There may have been a cover-up or a cover-up of the investigation, but I think it's just common fact by looking at how this was done that it was very poorly done. And our page isn't set up to rip on those individuals. I just think it's sad that they didn't do a better job, and now that the information that has come out that essentially proves David didn't do it, now we got a problem on our hands, because we've got killers there on the loose that are walking the streets to this day after something David did not do. So maybe that would be a good starting point for tonight. This isn't a he said, she said, and this theory versus that theory. It's basically without the bullet, the hand's missing, the fingerprint not on the gun, no one hearing the shots, the rear slider open. I mean, it's a slam Duncan, it's gone in the recent months from speculating or leaning towards one scenario to we basically know now that David didn't do it. So therefore, the question is, who did? Can the case get reopened? And thoughts going down that road. And I think that's the important thing. I think, because I think there's people out there that just think that we do not believe David did it, therefore we're conspiracy theorists because we're going to try to prove that he didn't. Well, the evidence shows that he didn't and physically could not have done this. So I think that's our take. I think. What are your two thoughts, Greg first, and then Catherine?
For me, I'm still open to the possibility, that David Crowley is guilty. But I've always been open to it, and it's always been the same question. I mean, we're at 3 years now, and I'm asking the same damn question. There's just nothing there to prove David Crowley is guilty. You read everything there. You read all of the documents, just everything. I do not understand how anybody could come to the conclusion that David Crowley was guilty. There's just nothing there. So the people that are so quick to say that David's guilty, he snapped, he did this, he did that, when you really press them, they don't have anything. They don't have any facts. They have nothing to back it up. So all that they can do is try to come after us personally, play tricks on us, do all of these stupid little weird games. But they need to realize it's not going to work. Real researchers are going to continue looking into this until this case can get reopened. I really think, that's justice. For me, that comes with justice. Is just figuring out what the hell happened here. Because like you said, there probably are some killers. There's people out there that are running free because they got nothing to prove David Crowley's guilty. Now I'm sounding like a broken record. I'm gonna unmute Catherine and let her talk. Go ahead, Catherine.
Thanks, Greg. But I agree with both of you, and that's why I really want to read some of these excerpts from this book so anyone who will listen will understand that. I have voiced a lot of frustration with the Apple Valley Police Department. However, reading in here, I think it's time that I give them kudos for what they did do right. They didn't mess everything up. However, when I first opened and looked into this case, I really thought I was going to show everybody and explain the medical terminology and help everybody understand why David really was guilty. That's what I thought I was going to be doing. And when I first came across it in the comments, I'm like, okay, people just don't understand what they're reading. And when I first read the first few pages of the report, and then I got to the autopsy reports, and it was like hitting a brick wall. I was like, wow, there is nothing here that points to his guilt. And so I want everybody to know I didn't come into this, going to go full board and saying he's innocent, because I honestly thought at the beginning that he probably did do it, but people didn't understand. Well, come to find out, I didn't understand everything that was wrong.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario, and what some of the research you've done, Catherine, as far as with a medical examiner, background with the folks that you have been working with, and then we've had on a vet, various people just to get their thoughts on things, and I think it's really opened up the door, because for me it was when we first brought on the medium was the first time that person said that the left hand was mummified and nothing else was, therefore it must have been in handcuffs or tied, or he was bound. David must have been bound to get a hand to look like that. And so that really opened the door to something for me that I never went down the road of them being tortured at all, the bodies. And so now when we, it takes for a medium for me to open my eyes to see that, and then we start seeing the length of the bodies that were there, how much time, the house was in the disarray. It just doesn't make a sense. So if they were, bound and gagged or held hostage or what have you for a couple of weeks and then killed later, that would explain the packages on the doorstep only being there from the weather elements or looking to me like 7 days. And the hand, after being bound, and the other hands were missing. And then there was confusion. Were they cut off? Were they eaten off? Or were they, tortured to come off? And then people had said also that how could they be tortured? Because the autopsy showed there was no torture. And I think that got into some question as well, too. And I want to take the time now to clarify, because I never have said this, is for those who say that, remember, we're talking about torture of the hands and or face. If someone's fingers are being broken, if someone's fingernails are being pulled out, if someone's being burned on their skin by a lit cigarette, you're not going to see those because those pieces of the body are gone. And so I don't think anyone intended to say that David and Kamel were tortured and beaten up and their bodies were bruised and everything else. I think the torture, if that indeed was done only to the limbs that were missing. The hands, the face. If the faces were bludgeoned, we don't have evidence of that. All we see is some skull bones, and there's nothing left of the face. They could have been tremendously tortured. There could have been, who knows what could have gone on to their hands if their fingers were broke or pulling out one by one or chopped off. Who knows? But if people do make the jump, the generalization that the autopsy shows that the bodies were not tortured at all, and that's just to put the disclaimer on of what remained of the bodies showed no evidence of torture. And so I think if we clear up that, then who knows what could have happened to Komel's hands, David's right hand, and Randy's arm.
Exactly, and that's the thing that I think the police also forgot, and even the techs. I can't speak for the techs, but the investigators, like you stated, the remaining body parts didn't show any, other than Rania, who had a fractured rib. However, with the medium velocity blood spatter and then the cast off spatter on the walls, the only way that could happen is if they were struck somewhere on their body. And since everything, the heads are gone and everything else is okay, that only leaves you very few options.
Correct. And, if someone comes back now and mentions, what if they were electrocuted with a car battery and shocked, would that be something that would, even though if there was something attached to the hands, I think that would be shown or reflected in the autopsy in the nervous system and whatnot. Is that correct? If you had some other pain done by an outside element like that, would that be found out in the autopsy if someone was electrocuted or cattle prodded?
I would suspect so, because there's going to be that electricity travels down a neural pathway and it eventually ends up to the heart. And I would think, now I could be wrong, but I would absolutely expect to see some type of damage to the heart muscle if that had been the case. Okay. And the autopsies clearly state the heart was fine.
Okay, so I think just for those listening out there that we can't rule out that the family, the two adults and possibly all three of them were tortured in some manner, physical torture to the body parts that were not discovered when the police came in. So I think that helps clear things up, because what they could have been tortured, they could have been kidnapped, held hostage for a period of 2 weeks. Who knows if they were bound, their arms in front of them or behind them, or what position they were. But like you said, Catherine, you bring up a good point. It's that blood spatter that I have a hard time with. If that's medium velocity blood spatter,
yes,
that would rule out that any shooting at all took place in that living room, but someone was bludgeoned or beaten in that living room. But then I think detectives would easily identify or spot that. Would they not? Like a fresh new investigator, wouldn't they be able to tell that blood spatter at high velocity versus medium?
Yeah, they are night and day. They look totally different. The patterns are different. The blood spatter, the drops it is night and day. And however, and that's kind of where I say that that there appears to be void patterns, like something was laid down. Because if they had been shot in that living room, no matter, even if Paleo had licked up some of the blood, the dog is not going to lick up everything from 3 bodies in a carpet, in a rug. It would seep through, and they would see that pattern somewhere, and it is nowhere to be found. And I wanted to interject this real quick back to the hand, and I did not know that you had spoken with the medium. I have my own views, but I'm glad that somebody else. But I wanted to say that they truly did say that the hand was probably bound, and that's why it was mummified.
That was what that particular medium said, and I don't think. In fact, maybe it was before they even saw the photo. They didn't know the photo, then confirmed it later after they were shown the photo. But that was the first time it was ever introduced that someone or both of them were potentially bound, and that's what opened the door to the other reason for both hands missing for Comel, and one missing for David, is perhaps they were bound for a couple of weeks.
Well, why I find their comment interesting is because one of the coroners I spoke with who saw the photo, that was their comment. They said the hand is mummified and it's lying on the book, so it's not lying on the rug. They said if it was on the rug, it would make sense, even if there weren't previous damage to it. But since it was on a book, their comment was these people, it was a possibility that their hands were bound or damaged. So I find that interesting.
Where's it? David's hand is on a book. I don't remember.
It was the one line on the Quran, wasn't it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I thought for sure maybe from the photo I was looking at, but and when I interjected and said if it was lying on the floor, let me clarify that was my opinion. But the coroner did state that was a high probability that it was his hands or hand was bound or injured before death.
And then
I don't think his hand was on a book, because remember they found the gun right next to his hand. I think the Quran was there. It was close, pretty close, but I don't think it was under it.
Yeah.
I think too that someone mentioned too that if there was a struggle, and if they were being held hostage and a struggle took place, things would be overturned and the place would be a mess. I don't think any of us agree that a struggle took place at all. I don't think anyone's even said that. But if intruders came in with weapons and they were easily subdued, then they could easily be tied up, bound, and whatever the case, without a struggle. So I don't think I've ever said that a struggle took place of any type, and I don't think any of the other two of you did either. And I think that came up once as well, as far as a struggle taking place and David's strength, and he would have been able to overpower them. Well, I still think that whoever did this with weapons in hand and his family there, that I think all three of them were easily compliant without saying a word, probably.
Correct. And Greg, I want to clarify, the reason why I said the hand on the book, I'm looking at the photo right now, and it looks like, you're right, it's not completely on the book, but it looks like it's resting on a small portion of it. But still, you are correct, it's not completely on the book like I thought it was. It's only like on the very bottom edge of the book. But yes, and I agree with you too, Dan, that it would be so easy to get David subdued. If they walk in a door and you have 2 or 3 people and they ambush you, nobody's going to try to fight somebody if they have, your family members under control. You're going to comply.
Yep, and who's to say that all this took place as well, or some of it down in the basement or another room or what have you altogether. But it does seem, with your previous statement, Catherine, that if there's no high-velocity blood spatter in that living room, and with a gunshot like that, you'd see it on the ceiling and the walls and the floor. And the only things that we see is a little bit on the walls, a bunch on the floor, but all of that is medium velocity, means no one was impacted by a weapon in that living room at all from a gun. No one was shot in that room with a gun. Is that a correct statement that they were shot elsewhere and either brought there or a mat or something was down covering up, and then after the beating took place of the medium velocity blood, there could have been something laid down for the actual killings, because everyone's in pretty much agreement that there's not a lot of blood at the site to warrant a triple homicide. I think most people are in agreement with that, which leaves us to believe that they were killed somewhere else and brought there, or beaten there, killed somewhere else, and bodies were dumped there, or something was laid down, such as a tarp or a canvas or a painting canvas or something on the ground, when also was taken away. Now, there's also thinking that someone had mentioned bloodletting as far as some kind of type of sacrifice, maybe in that downstairs bathroom where the blood was let out or drained. That could be, but I think that's more of a stretch. But we couldn't rule that out either. But the point is that the blood that should have been in that living room was not in that living room.
Agreed. And
yeah,
go ahead, Greg.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, I'm always talking over you. You go ahead. We need to hear what you have to say.
Okay. I'm just enjoying this. I'm just enjoying chatting. We've been wanting to do this for a while. So now that I got you here, please talk.
Yeah, because, I'm looking at all of this, and every time, especially, when I was looking at the blood spatter, and I keep trying to figure out why certain portions were left. The medium velocity on the floor, which goes in one photo, it's in 3 different directions. So the person, and again, we don't know because they didn't test the blood. We don't know whose blood is on the floor. But whoever that was, they were moving. They were a moving target and being attacked. And why did whoever did this, why did they leave that there? And then why did they leave the blood spatter on the wall, unless they were attempting to make it look like it was a gunshot wound, because they didn't seem to understand that there's a difference. And the clear blood on the wall by the door, that is cast off. They're just little tiny drops of blood. That came from whatever they were being attacked with. And so, but yet, with the way the medium velocity on the floor and that little spot of blood on the chair, reason tells you that there would be a massive amount of blood on that rug. And then where did they get Kamel's blood? If it's not there on the floor, where did it come from to write on the wall? They had to have, collected it. There are just so few ways to do this.
Yeah, that's a good point, Catherine, and it hasn't been brought up a lot, but several people did mention that taking that amount of time to write those many letters on that wall, there would be transfer dripping back and forth, up and down from the couch from her body. And
Yep.
So because that's not there and that's not evident, it seems that the person used a cup or a mug or a bowl or something to with her blood already in it to write the letters without getting up and down all those times, which
Yep.
means that someone had collected it somewhere, and that kind of gets back into the potential bloodletting. Whether that's true or not, it's beside the point. But her blood was collected somehow to get it into some sort of container to do the writing.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I wanted to run by Greg, in some of the information that's come out with that bullet in the ceiling, I know that you're not a big fan of, or not on board, I guess, with that bullet being found in the ceiling with the nuclear DNA, the touch DNA versus the nuclear. And we've gone over that a bunch. Do you want to give your side or your viewpoints of that as far as the weapon or the bullet that was found in the attic, where it had David's DNA on it? The police report says David's DNA, but it was elsewhere that mentioned, I believe, where Sophia was the first one to find it, a former member of the group, that actually says that it's nuclear, or it would actually have David's blood, brain tissue, brain matter on. There would be particles of his tissue on that bullet if it went through his skull, and it doesn't. I know you're not one to really believe that or buy that side of the story, and I think there's others out there as well. But can you give us a little background on why you're hesitant to buy that attic bullet story.
Sure. I have to go back in order to really do that. I really have to go back to the. We talk a lot about what could have happened, what might have happened, what we think happened. For me, I try to really strip it down to the very bare bones to say, you know what, this is what did happen. We have hands that are missing. That doesn't make sense. We have heads that are missing. That doesn't make sense. We have a daughter, a 5-year-old's arm, all of her arm is missing. It doesn't make sense. They tried to tie all of that to this dog, and there's no record that they did any testing. That doesn't make sense. So it isn't hard for me to go into the coulda, shoulda, woulda thing and say, well, this might have happened, that might have happened. I'm definitely open to those 3 people dying in the living room. I think that the reason why we haven't seen a lot of blood is because we don't have a lot of photos that show that blood. We have photos, that show what I think is blood. I know Catherine doesn't necessarily agree with that. I mean, but that's okay. The whole thing for me is just, what I know and what I think I know. And so getting to that bullet, I mean, to even go into the bullet in the attic is almost like nothing else makes sense. This makes even less sense. It really is the smoking gun. Now, because the only reason that I would say that it's possible that bullet is tied to David Crowley, because it is tied to him. His DNA is on there. But there's really no proof to really show that is the bullet that killed David Crowley. So I guess I'm kind of on the fence, kind of in, maybe 1 foot in, one foot out, people might say. But for me, I'm really just trying to just take a few steps back and just look at what I definitely know, and then just go with wherever that's taking me. And the fact that there is no blood, unless we can, there's some way to prove that that DNA is blood. But if it's a nuclear DNA, doesn't that discount that it is blood, like you guys have been talking about?
I think that if we go back another level to it a couple months ago, what we did find out, and I believe I think it was Sophia or maybe you, Catherine, who did tie that there were 3 bullets that had Comel Crowley's blood tissue nuclear DNA on 3 bullet fragments.
And it was Sophia.
And that was Sophia. So that really opened the door to all this, because that proves that she was shot 3 times, and 3 of those bullets, the only ones found by police, mind you, were all Comel's. So when the police that day, that they didn't even have Ranny's bullet that was found by the cleaning crew, and David's, which was allegedly found in the attic. And so I think that's a huge factor. What are your thoughts on that, Greg?
I've talked with her on this, and my view, just my personal view, just as somebody who doesn't have any knowledge or anything, just looking at this stuff. There's just because there's blood on those 3 bullets doesn't necessarily mean that Comel was shot by those 3. And that's where I differ. That's where I differ, because it wasn't just blood that happened to land on them or cast off blood on them. Those had DNA of her flesh, tissue of her body, so it went through her body. 3 bullets went through her body. So the only other option would be is if the killers shot Ranny in the arm or something, and then it also went through Comel's skin to get her blood on it. But it was not cast off blood dripping or landing in a pool of her blood. It had her DNA, her tissue of her body on those. But so did that whole ground, yeah. So that means that she was shot 3 times for sure. Is that correct, Catherine, or am I jumping to conclusions there?
Well, I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I do see in the photos where one of the fragments that did contain Comel's DNA absolutely has her hair entangled in it within the fragment itself, as well as lying on top of it if you look really close. but I didn't see where all 3 bullets had her tissue in it. I know they contained blood, but I didn't do enough research on that, so I'll kind of keep my lips quiet on that part.
Okay. Maybe someone can comment too when this video gets posted, because I think that was possibly more of the smoking gun than the attic when that was found out, because that would mean that the 3 bullet fragments found that were all her blood DNA on them were the bullets that entered at one point her body. 2 for sure for the head, because that's what the autopsy says, and then a third one, if it was went through a missing part of the head that the autopsy or medical examiner couldn't find, it may have been 3 times in the head, or she had 2 hands missing. If she put her hand up to block or a guard or something, it still had her items on it, and no other part of her body from the neck down had any bullet wounds in them. So correct. I think when Sophia first brought that up, people jumped to conclusions that there's no way she could have been shot 3 times, but we know she was shot 2 times. The evidence shows in the skull, and with the bullets there, up to or potentially 3 times, and that third one either being in the one of her 2 missing hands or in a part of the skull that they simply just couldn't find. But that was very odd. And then the bullet for Ranny was found that actually had her blood, was the one under the carpeting that the cleaners found. So regardless of how many times Comel was shot, police still left that scene that first day with 3 bullet fragments. Comel's that had Comel's blood, all 3 of them on there, and then none for David and none for Ranny, until the cleaning crew came and they found it. They did the test and found out that it had the DNA, nuclear DNA from Ranny, which means that was the one that entered and went through her skull. And then they found the one a month later in the attic that had David's touch DNA only, which
no, that was the same. It had the same type. It was the nuclear too.
I thought for sure that all of the bullets, with the exception of the one that was just ejected and found, and the one that was in the downstairs, and then the one in the attic, but Ranya's and Comel's all had blood on them, associated with them. The only one that did not have any of the victim's blood was the one that they say was David's. And in that one, and the reports strictly state, it says right there on that report, item 57, which is the bullet in the attic, did not have blood. They did not detect blood. So then they just said that they tested it, and then that's when they found his DNA, and then you go by process of elimination because the report is called nuclear DNA. So if it's not his blood, there's only one other option, nuclear, touch, whatever, because you're getting those cells from the nucleus. That's why it's called nuclear DNA, the nucleus of the cells, be it from a finger, a hand, a sweat, whatever. And so his nuclear DNA was all that was located on that, which is easily explained because it's his gun, sure. His magazine, right. He loads.
Right.
But the only difference with that one, Catherine, and I agree with that, was but the police say that was his gun that fired the rounds. We, or better yet, I personally believe that the gun used had a silencer on it. That's why no one could hear anything, and whoever the killers were took that gun with them, and it's still out there floating around somewhere to this day. The problem is, if that gun was fired, because police had picked up David's gun that was laying there, and so if the perpetrators came back and fired that shot into the ceiling using that same gun so it would allegedly match, how would David's DNA, his touch or transfer skin DNA, be on that bullet if someone else loaded it, unless they were able to get David's cell on that bullet, after the fact? Is that something easily done by swiping it across an old article of clothing that David had, or an old cap that he wore, or something? How would that DNA get on there if he didn't load it?
Sure, there would be lots of ways like that. Yeah, absolutely. Anything that would contain his cells.
And those guys were all with him working on the project, so they would have had enormous amounts of things to be able to get his blood, as far as a planted piece of evidence in that attic with David Crowley's DNA on it. And so that's the other scenario. So we got a lot of things here. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, there's a bigger thing about that bullet, about item 57. They can't even tie that bullet to David's gun. They are not certain that item 57, from the documents that I've read, from everything that I've read, that they are not certain that item 57 was even fired from David's gun. They cannot prove that.
You are correct.
I didn't hear that before. I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Yes, he's correct. It's in the reports.
Yeah, where they talk about item 31, where they're comparing bullets, and this is where it gets. This is why, Catherine, when you say that they weren't talking about blood, I mean, that is another critical red flag for me too. They stop. They're talking about blood with these other bullets. They very quickly. I don't even know if they even mentioned any bullet tied to 57 or that they were even going to test for it. I have to go back and read exactly it, but they were not. I mean, they were just. To me, they were just giving us what they wanted to, and how they worded things was very tricky, especially in relation to item 57 and item 31. They can't put that bullet in David's gun, regardless.
I'm looking up that report right now.
Now the other thing there for the newer listeners is that because that bullet was found a month later, there may have been new people on the case or new technicians working that, because they already had the narrative was already locked into cement and dried at this point. They couldn't change anything then, so it may not have even mattered if it came from his gun or not. But for the newer listeners out there, they did say that all of the bullets were fired from David's gun that was next to his left hand when they entered the scene. They said all those came from there. And that's me personally speculating that couldn't have been the case, because I think they just laid his gun next to his body and fired a similar weapon that did have a silence on there to actually kill the people, and they took that with them. I don't think I think they still have that gun floating out there, the one with the silencer, because I think if they came back later and fired that hole into the ceiling, while the neighborhood's already on high alert 2 days later, obviously they would hear that, so that if that hole wasn't there in the attic and it was done on the 19th, and then someone chucked a bullet up there in the attic and it bounced around, and police found it later that had David's DNA already on it, that whole scene could have been planted later on. Right. So if they did the test and they don't think it came from it, that could very well be true, as I don't believe any of those bullets came from David's hand. The one that was found next to his hand, just to clarify.
Yeah, right. Going back to the thing that you said about a struggle while Catherine looks for that document, the only sign, and I did mention this recently, the only sign of a possible struggle from anything that I found is that the knife is like ready for somebody to stab it. Now, if the knife was closed, then I wouldn't even think about a struggle. To me, that kind of shows that maybe there was a struggle. It's a possibility. Like, who walks around with a knife like that? Who doesn't have their knife closed, and why is that knife out? The knife makes no sense.
The knife is another whole story altogether, because that got very little attention. I don't think it was mentioned in the news and the press release at all. But it was found in an open position, like Greg said. It was in a locked open position, correct? I mean, it wasn't a switchblade, but it was open and was there on the scene, and that's a very important point.
Yes, and what has always bothered me about that is on their testing of the knife, it has blood from David, Kamel, and Rania. No prints, but blood, and then they never even went further with that. They didn't try to find out why. How did the blood get there? It's lying next to David's left leg in a part of the rug where there is no blood. You can look underneath it. There isn't any blood underneath it. So how did the blood get on the blade?
Well, I do think that there was blood there. I do think where that knife was found, where the bodies were, I think that there was blood there. The hard part that I'm having with is, well, then why didn't Kamel's DNA or blood or anything mix with her daughter's? How is that possible if they were killed in the same room at the same time? That also doesn't make sense either. But The knife, the blood on the knife, I can buy that by just saying, well, because it was all of their blood was there, all of their bodies were there, you know. So I'm not saying that I necessarily think that that's fact, because I don't, you know, I don't know. I'm just open to that possibility.
Yeah, that's a good point, Greg. The knife, in my opinion, is a big question mark, because if the scene was staged and the killers had time to do all this other stuff, why didn't they take that with them and remove it from the scene? Or, you know, it's not like they forgot it behind. They took time to get everything else the way they wanted it. So that's a big question mark, I think, that knife.
Yeah, there's many question marks, right, Dan?
Lots and lots.
The other thing I wanted to touch on tonight is because we have evidence, I believe evidence that it was a triple homicide, and people, more than one male, were in that house doing whatever they did to this family. It opens the door to things being left out, set up, and or staged. Many people who saw the weed on the marijuana on the bedroom dresser, everyone says you don't leave your weed laying out like that. Anyone who smokes weed, why would it be laying out like that? David was a clean-cut person, and typically would have his things, I believe, put away. I'm of the belief, this is my opinion, that also was let out on display for the investigators to see, set out on purpose to help drive that narrative home that he was a whack job. As with the wedding ring laying on the glass table, that's going to lead investigators to think, oh, problems in the marriage, troubled marriage. Before he did this, he wanted to make sure he took his wedding band off. That, I think, was staged as well, as far as the laptop also playing the playlist called Ascent, with all of these songs playing in a loop that someone wants to ascend to. This was all part of the staging, I think, of the scene to help investigators come up with the conclusion that they wanted, the desired conclusion. So I think those are things that I think were all done that way on purpose. Same with the book, the Quran, and all of this other nonsense, I'll say.
Yeah, and I found these reports. I wanted to read directly from the report themselves. This is the BCA report number 4, and it says, blood was not detected on item 57. That's the attic bullet. However, a sample was collected from 57, and that later when they, so no blood. There's no blood, but they did take a sample, and then that's when you go further down, it says that it has male DNA. And that's where it's coming in, where it has to be the nuclear DNA. There's no blood. And then the part with the gun, which I find interesting, what Greg was talking about earlier, and this is lab report number 5, results of the examination. Item 1 being the gun that was David's on the floor, and then they do the comparative examinations, and they say that his gun fired items 2, 3, 9, 30, 36, 37, and then items 42, 43, 44, 45, 53, and 57. However, a little bit further down, it says item 57 against item 31 showed the presence of matching features. This means that item 1 fired 31. And that didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I think it's the way it's written there is goofy. And hopefully we can get someone also to comment below the video on this, because I think that when you do a testing of the lands and grooves on a bullet fired from a rifle, you can tell if it's an exact match or not. But those are slugs. Those are slugs coming out of a rifle. This is a handgun that's a hollow point that mushrooms out. Is it even possible to conduct a lands and grooves testing on a mushroomed hollow point bullet that changes? It's not just a slug that's coming out. It's changing the shape altogether once it's fired. So how are they able to match that back? and maybe that's just me showing my ignorance, but is it even possible to do that other than just assuming it came from that weapon?
Oh, that's a good question. I have no idea. Greg, do you?
No, I don't. No.
So I know that's what they say in the statement in the police report, but I have never personally bought that theory that testing was done. Like when you take a handgun and load a bullet in there and fire it into the water, the water pool or water canister, and then you go retrieve that bullet later, then match it up under a microscope to make sure, because every gunfire and the firing pin, the way it slides through that barrel, has its own identity, like a fingerprint. It only can come from one weapon, and so they typically, in other cases, they'll match them up in a murder case, for instance. In this case, because hollow points are used in the mushroom out, I don't, and I'm not aware of any way that they can test that. So I
tell you what, can you guys talk for just a few minutes? I know someone who knows quite a bit about this stuff, so let me go give them a call really fast. I'll be right back.
All right, that sounds good. So that was an interesting case. Now the other thing, Greg, is we've got the bullet that was fired into the floor that ended up in the wall of the basement, and that didn't go through any flesh, didn't go through any body, didn't go through any human flesh, so it fired with ease into the floor, through the floor, and into the basement. The only other bullet that we have in that house that was found that went through a floor or a ceiling is the one in the ceiling. And so if that round would have been fired into or through some person or through some tissue, it would not have, I don't think, gone up into the attic and bounced around in the attic. That to me was just a shot fired, like a warning shot into the basement, onto the floor, to get the people to agree to do whatever, and then a warning shot either fired into the ceiling that they blamed on David's kill shot, or that shot was fired later on the 19th by the individuals in that home. But either way, I don't think that went through any human flesh at all, because I don't think it would have had the velocity to get up into that, clear through the ceiling, boards, into the roof, into the attic. So I think that was, and that's my opinion, I want to clarify, that the bullet that went into the basement was similar to the bullet that went into the attic. Those two didn't go through any human flesh, is my belief. So once again, the police solved the case that David did it without the kill shot. There's no bullet left in the house that killed David. And so, and if you find it later, a month later, that can't be, I think Catherine had mentioned this before, maybe an investigator did it. You can't really admit that into evidence if it wasn't found after the scene was cleared. If it was found later, that's non-admissible at that point, because it opens the door that it could have been planted there. The weapon, the bullet, either someone in the attic dropped it into the insulation up there, or someone actually fired it and it fell where it naturally fell, but it had nothing to do with the kill shot. Both of those would be considered planted evidence.
So then, basically, they can't even. The police can't even. The only bullets that they could really have to really challenge anybody who would want to reopen the case is the bullets with Kamel. Right, Kamel, the three tied to her.
Really, it's only those four. The evidence that only could be used if this thing ever went to a court case, for instance. Let's say David was alive and was being charged. I think it's only those four bullets had the blood on them. 3 from Kamel, 1 from Ranny was the only ones that you can even admit into evidence. So if you can't admit the evidence into the kill shot to David, and you don't have his fingerprints on the gun, and it's laying next to his wrong hand, you obviously have reasonable doubt that he did it in the first place. So that case would never even go far.
Right, but if the scene was cleared, let's even say the scene was cleared on January 19th. They find the bullet connected to Rania on January 20th. Right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Rani's was the 19th as well. Or was it the 20th?
No, hers was actually, hers was on the 20th. Yeah.
So even if they clear the scene on the 20th, I mean, then they
it's
only
hard
have,
to believe.
then they have 4 bullets, and when they cleaned it on the 17th, when the bodies are found, they left there with only 3 bullets at that point. 3. And there was 3 dead bodies, so the officers assumed that we've got our kill shots. Everyone was killed shot one time, case closed. And so that's where you get the issue is, as far as people have said on the page, that's grounds enough to reopen the case just right there.
Right. Yeah.
The bullet you find for Ranny, the kill shot for Ranny is found after the scene was cleared. The alleged gunshot bullet you find from David was found after the scene was cleared. Whether it was his or not, it's still no longer admissible after that time because the scene was cleared and other people were in going through that house, which means those 2 bullets were contaminated, either directly or on purpose or not on purpose. It's contaminated evidence.
Right, and those 2 bullets would have probably been contaminated by the same people that were in there on the same day, because all of David's friends, or people from the Gray State team, whoever, there's like 5 or 6 of David's so-called friends that are in the house on January 19th. While the bullet in the carpet is still there, and while the bullet that they say was in the attic is still there. But I think you were spot on to really notice to say, if you really want to think to prove that the bullet in the attic did hit David, you only need to look at the bullet in the basement. Somebody who has knowledge, somebody who can look at that, you can look at the basement that was shot. You can look at the bullet that was shot in the basement, look at the bullet that was shot in the living room ceiling, and compare them, because they do look similar.
Yeah, that would be an honest, comparison as far as what they would have looked like as a result of going through just, hardware and hardwood without going through any type of flesh. But if it would have gone through David's head or skull or something and shot as people speculate that he was on his knees with his head down, shooting himself in the mouth or what have you, and the bullet went into the ceiling, it still would have ricocheted, it would have deflected, it would have tumbled around and landed somewhere probably in that living room without going up through the ceiling with ease like it did. So that alone is where I have problem with that even being David's kill shot, which means there's no other bullet found in the house. That means the killers who killed David, wherever he was killed, living room or not, took that bullet with them. So that's another trophy, I think, that someone's got in their home. A trophy from the scene. And I think there's a lot of, as we talk about symbolism and things left behind on purpose and things taken on purpose, it gets back to the Bohemian Grove owl. I think that there's a potential that was placed into the home on purpose for those of us looking at this, that they could have put that 2 and 2 together. By thinking that David had some connection to the Bohemian Grove and was into the occult or something. Because I can't think the David that we think we know, and which we don't, would have ever had a Bohemian Grove statue in his home. I have a hard time believing that. Do you, Greg?
I have a hard time only because I can't find anything else that like if he's going to have that, why doesn't he have other weird occultist things too? It's just, it does seem kind of placed in there. So,
but do you think it could have been placed there during the 3-week time period or the 2 weeks that they set it in there?
I don't. Hey, let's make it I mean, yes, it is possible, right? I'm totally open to that, definitely. But I mean, they would have had to have put it in there on the 19th, right? Or when could they have possibly put it? We still don't
know. The question that I have, and this would be a good one for when Catherine gets back too, is
I'm back.
The problem we have. Hi, Catherine. Is the problem we have with the 2 weeks of 2 weeks of held hostages? Were the others in there? Were they coming and going, or did they all just stay there? Did people come and go willingly in through the garage with a car, in through the back door, or at night, or were they held hostage there all the night, and then people came and checked on them and fed them and whatnot during that 2 week period? I'm not sure if were people coming, what was an intruder, for instance, coming in through the front door carrying a Bohemian Grove statue and then placing it in that on his office dresser during the 2 week period before they left. We know
somebody
that
might have given it to him
they
too.
They didn't come back. They left after the killings were done. They didn't come back, so no one was coming in and out. But the 2 weeks is suspicious, I think. Go ahead.
No, I was saying somebody could have also given that to him too. That was another theory. Cursed it, given it to him, and then a lot of this weird stuff started happening. But that's just another off base theory. I really don't go there because again, you're not really going to get too much factual data, and it's not going to lead to any place. But the fact is, it was there. There's no explanation why it was there. If that was going to be part of his Gray State project or anything like that, I can kind of buy that, because in the basement you do have a head. You have that white head that is used in the Gray State trailer, where the guy's head pretty much turns into that white, and it's just it gets very. And then the Gray State, one of the last versions, was supposed to take it into a very spiritual area. The problem with all of that, and the problem with the people that told me that David was involved with the cult, is that they're not credible people. They can't be taken seriously. So I can't really take anything that they've said seriously. I can only say that we know that statue was there. When it was there, I don't know. I'm very curious to see where that statue is now, and I'm more curious to see who made that statue, because it does look like somebody made that. And if David made that, I would like to know that.
Yeah, I also would like to know how that, if it was given to him, if it was a prop, I would have expected to see it down in the basement along with the other gear for movie-related gear. If it was given to him as a gift, why would he accept it? If he made it, I have a hard time believing that he would have made it, but it looked very well done. Whoever made it, it looked very, very good, from an artistic standpoint. But
it was accurate.
Very,
accurate.
Very strange, yeah. And then the other thing is, as far as when you mentioned, Greg, as far as hearing things from other people, these are the same people that led us to believe that one of David's last searches on Google on the internet was a search for Aleister Crowley and things like that, as far as the occult. So we can't take that with any proof also, because that's also fed to help sear that narrative of a person that became unhinged, lost despair, and became despondent. And right now, in my mind, I'm throwing all those things out because none of those are true.
Sure.
I don't have support of any of that for evidence. That's all hearsay. Catherine, what'd you find?
Well, I spoke with this person, and they said that, in their opinion, and they said to make sure that I put that out there, it's their opinion, that if with that particular, the bullet, the PDX-1 180 grain, they said that that's a heavier bullet and it moves slower. And they said oftentimes it will not mushroom completely out. So if there's any part of the base of that bullet left, they would still be able to match up striations. They said, however, if it has fragmented or if it's completely flat or just a mushed up mess of metal, they said then it would be almost virtually impossible. So I guess it really depends on the state that the bullets were found. Was there really any part of the bullet? Was there a base left to that fragment, or were they completely broken, shattered, or flat?
Interesting. So I think Greg had a good point, that you would be able to compare and identify the two bullets, the one that found in the ceiling that didn't go through any person's body, and the one in the basement that didn't go through any person's body. You could line those two up and they would look similar. And then the 4 other ones that went through Comel and Rani, I bet they would all look similar. But as far as any testing done, I have a hard time believing that the BCA lab safely concluded that they were all fired from that weapon. I agree they were fired from that make and model of a weapon, but how do you prove that it came from that serial number weapon?
Yeah, unless they did a test fire from the gun, I don't know. And they had asked me if there were any parts, had the bullets actually mushroomed completely out, and I said, you know what, I'd have to go back and look, because from what I remember, there were at least 1 or 2 that were fragmented, one that was completely almost flat, the one that if I recall it correctly, on the floor that had Camel's, you could tell it obviously went through her head. It has her hair inside of it. Now that one looked like to be just a mess of a bullet. It didn't even, but I don't know. I might be remembering it wrong. So, if fragments, they said definitely not. There's no way that you could compare a fragment. There wouldn't be enough left. So.
Yeah, which is kind of all that they say that they found from 57, right? Was just a fragment, if I remember correctly.
I'm trying to read now.
And the other thing which has caused confusion in the past is when they're talking a bullet. In my mind, it's a bullet that gets fired, and once it's fired, it becomes a fragment. And if it gets hit hard enough and starts to splinter and breaks apart, those are called splintering pieces or pieces that fall off, but the fragment itself is the actual thing that's left.
Okay.
So there's confusion on some of the pages as far as, well, of course, Camel could have had fragments on 3 of the bullets, on three fragments, because one of those bullets that shot her could have splintered off to 3 times, and they could have found it. And I said, no, what they found, because these were mushroomed, there still was the actual bullets remaining were still in a big lump. Now, a small piece could have fragmented or shattered off, but I don't think that's what they're talking about here when they're talking about blood and DNA being found on these fragments. Fragments are 6 fired bullets. There should be 6 fired fragments left, regardless of the shape. Now, I'm no weapons expert, so I could be wrong, but please leave your comments below if that is. But I don't think we're talking about the splintered pieces that broke off as far as meaning the word fragment in the police reports. I think there only is 6 fragments found in the house.
Yeah, because right now I'm pulling up the fragment on item 31 in the photos from Ugly Truth, and it's image number 109 of 187, and I don't see how they could compare that to anything.
And that's what that's what I believe too. I think. But
well, they compare it to 57, and they say that it's pretty much it's the same thing. So if 57 looks like 31, right, and is 31 the one that was shot in the basement, that landed in the basement? Is that what item 31 is?
Item 31 is from the living room.
Okay, so that's the part that went into, okay.
Yeah, because I'm sitting here looking at this, and I'm like, there's really nothing left of that.
Yeah, so that is weird that they're comparing item 31 to 57.
Yeah.
Because 31 is, there's nothing there. Are they saying there's nothing there on 57 too? If it's matching, then what do you have? Then they still don't have the actual bullet that would have landed in the attic the same way that the rest of the bullet landed in the basement.
Yeah.
Catherine, you were saying that there's somewhere, and I need this. I really need this to see. You were saying there's somewhere that says that there is no blood on item 57, and you gave the page number or you gave the source. Can you give that to us one more time? I want to look.
Yes.
I really want to look that up.
Let me get that. I'll go straight to it. It is, of course,
that will seal the deal for me, I think.
Yes, it says lab report. It's the BCA nuclear DNA dated 3/16/2015. Lab report S15-00662. Lab report number 4, and it's on the second page under results of laboratory examinations. First sentence: blood was not detected on item 57. However, a sample was collected from item 57 as 57-1. And that is what was tested, and that's where they found DNA. But it was not blood.
Is that just a swab they take?
Yeah, I'm assuming it just says a sample was collected.
Okay. I've got the...
I don't know why I'm having such a hard time finding that page. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead and look for it, Greg. I've got a spreadsheet pulled up here with the bullets. For those trying to follow along here, when you're looking at the evidence, the table tents, the yellow numbers, the bullets for Comel were 42, 43, and 44. Ranny's DNA match was bullet item number 53. David's we talked about was 57. Down in the basement and found in the wall was number 45 that didn't hit anybody. That's the one I refer to as it was probably fired as a warning shot or something directly into the floor. Go ahead. Sorry.
Greg, if you're looking at the full report, the redacted report that has all 400 and something pages on it, right? It would be.
Oh, let me go to that. Okay.
Because I can give you the exact page number.
Yes, please. That would be it. Because I'm looking at the 40-page one, and I think it's there, but I don't know why I'm having a hard time finding it.
Yeah, so go to the big one, and it's the way my computer shows it's a little goofy, but it will be either page 464 or 465. It might start on 464 and then 465. Okay. And you'll see results of laboratory examination report number 4.
Okay. Sorry, my cat is annoying. She wants attention. Okay, 463, 464, report of examination of physical evidence.
Yep, and then the next page down, 465. Look under
okay, addict. Mm-hmm. Results of laboratory. Blood was not detected on item 57. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there it is. That pretty much seals it for me. Thank you.
Yep.
It does it.
Yeah, because when you read further down, well, of course, the next one is DNA profiling was performed on blood previously indicated, but the one after that, where it talks about item 57, DNA profiling was also performed. So that's distinguishing. It was not blood. So that was other DNA that was taken.
Okay.
And David's kill shot would have certainly had blood on it, right?
Yes.
And so if we can't tie that bullet to David at all as far as a kill shot. The next thing, I think someone on the group was going to do an example of what a bullet hole through sheetrock would look like after it's already been mushroomed and versus firing it directly into the sheetrock. And I think that individual is going to do that test in his backyard, for instance, with a coconut or a watermelon or something, and then fire it directly in, so it'd be small and thin, the hole, prior to the mushrooming, and then firing it through a watermelon or a coconut where it's already blown up, and then have it travel through that same sheetrock. It would be much larger. And then I think what we were going to test was what size hole was that in the ceiling at the Crowley home. If it was a clean, nice, small one, that would be evidence that it didn't travel through anything before it reached the ceiling, or was it a wide, mushroomed type bullet that already had traveled through something. Now, if we can get the evidence, or if police would have done the evidence on that, and they can say that there was just a warning shot fired into the ceiling, or someone just fired a weapon into the ceiling without hitting anything, that also could be proof enough, not that it's not David's kill shot, and there's no bullet to show David was killed there at the scene. Wouldn't those and just those handful of things be enough to reopen the case?
I would hope so. And, I want to go back to the part about, when you look at the pictures, the ones that you have posted on your site, and that's what I cover in my video, you can see a slight indentation, a smooth, rounded slight indentation just before the hole in the ceiling. And that doesn't occur. I would not assume that would occur with a fragmented bullet. How would it give that smooth entrance? I mean, it's on image 10 of 28.
Yeah, it does. I see that as well. It does look, to the naked eye, it looks smooth, and I'm no forensics person, so it looks that way to me, but it would be nice to have that tested just to see what the opening or what the diameter would be of a shot fired as a mushroom bullet versus a non-mushroom, what the difference would be, and then what that one was in that case. Now, the new homeowners obviously moved into the house, and there's new ceiling up there, and it's all been repaired, so they can't go back and test it now, and I don't think they tested it back then, and so you'd almost have to use just the photographic evidence to see the width, the diameter width of that hole in the ceiling. It still would have been nice if the investigators would have done the trajectory from the ceiling to see where that was fired from to hit that angle. I don't believe they've done that, but there's no evidence to support that they didn't also. But it'd be nice to see where that came from as far as the trajectory, where that person fired that gun, so we can line things up.
Exactly, and that's something they should have done too. Not just with that, but with the blood spatter on the floor, they could have easily pinpointed the position of whoever was being hurt. Yeah, the convergence point. They would have been able to know if they were standing, sitting, lying down. And same thing with this bullet hole in the ceiling. They could, and even the one in the floor. You know, where was the person standing in the room? They could have figured that out too, but they didn't.
Yeah, there should have been the trajectory points using those long plastic rods to show, or even thread, where the shot was fired from. For that one found in the carpeting, I think they could have done that for the basement one for sure, and the ceiling one for sure. Then at least you'd have a point of reference of where all this took place.
Yes, and I did speak with someone that I know who specialized in blood spatter. It's not their job anymore. It was a long time ago. But they said that right now, because I said, well, what can I do to try to figure out the convergence? And they said there's nothing you can do. It's too late. They said they should have done that to begin with the string and lasers. And, you know, they asked if an analyst was called in, and I said no. And they said that was a huge mistake.
Hey Dan, weren't there some reports about some wires or some strings in the house when Corey Zarowski was there or something? Do you remember that? It was very vaguely mentioned.
No, Corey Zarowski, he was the author of the City Pages article that came out in March of 2016 or 2017, I think. I don't
that might have been
that. He may have mentioned it, but I think it's something he may have been overheard, but I don't think he saw anything himself as far as that.
Oh, okay.
I don't believe they did. I don't believe they did any of that, because that would be in the photographic evidence as well. I think in the case file, in the packet. I remember getting that all from the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting case, and there was photos upon photos of trajectory shots, laser string and the plastic rods that show the impact point of different shots that were fired as part of the photographic evidence at the scene, as part of the forensics. And there was nothing that we've received that shows that. Now, we know we haven't received everything, but that would certainly, if they would have done that, that wouldn't be something that would have been redacted for any reason or held or withheld.
Do we know where that would be? Like, if we wanted to find that, if they actually had a report like that, would that be a BCA question or?
Well, I would think
Apple
Captain
Valley
might know this better, but I think it would be part of the BCA or part of the ballistics, firearms and ballistics analysis section of the report.
Yeah, it should have been either BCA and they actually should have called in an analyst, an actual individual person, and that's what they do. And I don't see any names on any of their lists that states a blood spatter analyst at all.
Yeah, unless those are separate documents, it's very important, I think, to find out if like you said, if they did those tests at all. Because if they did, there should be documentation.
Is there anywhere where the police say how many pages that they have in their reports, which we could then compare with how many we have?
The police, like Jim Gummer said that we got all of the police reports, which were, 94 pages. So, and I think the last two weren't really reports from the police. So we got 92 pages, and they say that that's it. They have audio recordings of people, so we haven't gotten those. So if you guys, if there's a good way you think we can try to get those, man, I'd love to get a hold of that audio.
Okay, well,
or
if
at least a transcript of the audio. Go ahead.
Yeah, and if he's saying himself that we have received, everybody has received the full reports, and there is no documentation whatsoever in there about any type of string analysis or lasers or plastic rods or nothing being done, and no blood spatter analyst being called in, then it wasn't done. If it's not written, it isn't done.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet it was not.
but they're not with the BCA, right? So that's Apple Valley.
But they have reports. Now the reports, like that big, huge one that has 400 some odd pages, is that who put all of that together? Because there's police reports mingled in with BCA reports.
Right. And they don't give you all of the police reports either, because we've counted pages and they don't have them all in there.
Well, we've got two things to clarify. I just want to clarify two things that, in the
Please.
Tom Lydon Fox 9, he did say on record that he had like 1,500 pages of reports or something. Gummert says we got everything with 94. But just to clarify that, the 94 is just the Apple Valley Police reports, and those are just supplemental pages, like Judy Prochnow likes to say, just a supplemental report, not everything. But when the case was done, whoever helped out and assisted, like the Dakota County Electronic Crimes Unit, the Minnesota BCA, they're still going to turn their reports into the Apple Valley Police Department so they can have everything in one spot. The case belongs to Apple Valley Police. So whether they contributed only 94 pages, they should still be sitting on all 2,000 pages of everything that was done by outside agencies. It's still their responsibility to have the entire package together as the case. That's my impression.
Well, look,
correct?
Yeah, if there's 93 pages of police reports and we only got 92, then that means Gummert lied, because Gummert it was a very clear question. Did we get everything? Did we get all of the police reports? I'll have to go back and make sure how specific it was, but that was the intent. And he said, yes, you've gotten it all. So
I think
I'll have to go back and make sure
that as well. Now we know that's not true, whether or not he's lying or being
he lied.
People, but there's way more than what we have seen. There has to be. All we saw was the supplemental reports. I put a request in for the dash cam from Tara Becker's officer's squad car because the video was rolling as well. So we've got audio we can get, video we can get, but I think there was hundreds, if not thousands, of pages on this case. And so I don't believe personally that he's being honest, but he could spin that any way he wants.
And another way to check too is their sign-in paper. They list everyone who signed in, what time they got there, what time they left, and on that I do not recall seeing anyone who would have been an analyst. And BCA doesn't mention an analyst.
Could that have been part of Joe Cooksey's crime scene team, whatever that means?
Well, on all of, I don't know, but all of the names, and when they do their string up, and stuff like that, what I was told, there would have been pictures, because remember they were doing the before and after, and they showed the photos of the body bags being moved. At that point, the strings would have been up, and they would have still been staying there, in that position. Sure. So, and I see no proof of any of that being done.
That's true. Not there. And even if they did them, they wouldn't have had the bullet tied to Rania, and they definitely wouldn't have had the bullet tied to the bullet to item 57 in Correct. The attic. So they wouldn't have been able to do those. That would have just made them look worse. It actually works in their favor that they didn't do it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think about what Dan was saying earlier too about how they had already determined, they had predetermined in their mind, and they state this in that one article, whether it was 2 hours or 2 weeks or whatever, they had already decided in their mind David was guilty, but they did that with only 3 bullet fragments. They had casing, but they only had 3 fragments, and it all contained Kamel's blood. They didn't know that at the time, but yet that to me is I can't think of the term, but how could you predetermine with such little information?
Yeah, I don't think even at that point they had finished the autopsies by the time that they were saying that we're treating this. They don't, they're not concluding, but they're treating it as a double murder suicide.
Correct.
That's impossible. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry, I cut you off again.
No, I don't have anything else. Just to say that, Catherine was right. They had 3 bullet fragments, and I think there was 5 casings on the ground when they left. 5 bullet casings and 3 bullets, or was there?
There were 6 bullet casings.
4. So there was, I think, 6 casings and 4 bullets found when they left and when they cleared the scene.
Correct.
6 casings. So right then, right off the bat, you've got 2 already missing. And nothing jives, and then they already started to treat it. And that's a very important way to say it, I think, Greg, is they were treating it as a double murder suicide within 48 hours. I mean, that's just
24.
Awful. 24 or 48 hours. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't even like it.
When they got called back in February to look at that ceiling hole, they went back then and someone was tasked with looking at the photos to see if the bullet hole was there. And what we heard was, I think, the only option that they could report is, yes, that bullet hole was there. Now, I think whether they saw it or not, I don't think they're going to be able to, I don't think they would have been honest enough to say, you know what, we did miss that hole. I think by that time they were backed into a corner, and their investigation looked shoddy already. 1 month in that they said, yes, we looked at the photos and the bullet hole was there. I think they had to say that was a narrative that they had to push, because that really would have made them look bad.
Yeah, they absolutely did, and I know it. Like, I cannot say thank you to Zachary enough. I mean, I am telling you guys, we literally stayed up till 5:30 in the morning doing photo edits. Now, even he couldn't get it to match up correctly. Now, and that was with one photo that I had captured from where the bullet hole actually was finally photographed. Now, the other one that I have found since then, which shows a better positioning, and I have done edits again, and it does not match up. They're not even close. They're not even remotely close. And so the one where people are saying that there's a bullet hole there, it is strictly a light anomaly. When you take the 2 and you zoom in on the one with the bullet hole, when you pull back, you can't see it. You zoom in on that, and there's a hole there as plain as day. You do the same thing with the light anomaly. You zoom in, and all you get is a brighter light. That's all that it is. Now, if you go negative, of course, it's going to be darker and it's going to look like a hole, but that's because you've put it in negative form. And then when you start doing your positions and changing the directions, the one with the actual bullet hole in the ceiling turns out to be closer to the living room, where the light anomaly looks more toward the middle of the light. So, God bless his heart. Seriously, the man works really hard on that. And we're just going to differ on that. I do not see those being the same. And then back to the same reality is, say for the sake of argument, it was there. Now they're telling everybody, oh yeah, we know it was there, but they didn't photograph it, they didn't swab it, they didn't test it, they didn't look for a bullet fragment, they did nothing. So now it's either they're telling us they're completely inept and they can't even figure out to do their job, but yet they see a hole in the ceiling, or they missed it and they're trying to cover their tracks. Because Detective or Officer Bone, whatever he was, Detective Bone, whatever his title is, he states nothing at all at any point up until February 18th. And then he says, and his wording is, when he walks in, and they open the door and there is an obvious hole in the ceiling. So how could everybody miss an obvious hole in the ceiling? How many times had they been back there? That was his 3rd time back to the house. And he only saw it the 3rd time when it was pointed out. I don't buy it.
Yeah, that's something, I think, Catherine, you're right on the money, that can't be explained away very easily on either end. If they did see it, as they said they did, there is no mention of it in the police report at all. So
well, no, but they're not saying that. They're not saying that. They're not saying that they saw it on the 17th, and they're not saying that they saw it on the 19th.
Oh, correct. Oh, I got you. But what we're saying is if they did see it on the 17th, it wasn't mentioned in their police report. So we could.
No, they're only saying they're only saying that when they went back on February 19th, when they went back and looked at the photos that were taken on January 17th, they're claiming that the bullet hole is there. My question is, well, then show us. Why don't you just show us that bullet hole then? I asked Gummert, when did you see that bullet hole? He doesn't recall when he saw that bullet hole.
Yeah, can we say CYA?
Yeah, so that's a cover-up. That's a cover your ass right there. And that's not to say that the triple homicide is covered up, but it is to say that it's more than likely that aspect of the case was or has been covered up.
Because they can't explain it. They obviously, if they have to look back and then say, oh, oops, yes, there is a bullet hole, without any writing of it whatsoever, and nobody sees it, the text, the crime scene investigators, who it's their job to go top to bottom, didn't find it. And it's like, okay, nice try.
Right. That's the smoking gun right there.
And there's a lot of these smoking guns. And for a lot of the new people, the new members as well joining the page, I want to clarify, and you guys can jump in if you'd like to, but I know from my experience, the people like to say, like Eric Nelson, that that us folks think it's a government conspiracy, a government hit, the feds did this, a black ops team did this, a wet work team did this. I don't personally believe that's the case, and I don't think the government was involved at all. Now, I also believe that David didn't do this, and so it can't be option A or B, which they're presenting the viewers with in the documentary called A Gray State. The government did this, or David did. I think the official answer is option C, some outside entity or people or persons did this. Now, the next question comes in as, was the Apple Valley Police Department active in a cover-up? Now, I think right off the bat, in my opinion, the answer is no, they were not active in a cover-up. They were not trying to cover up this. I think when they actively showed up and honestly did their work to do this, they were investigating it the best they could. But by the time a week or 2 or 3 came along, I think they knew that they were backed into a corner. So by the time a month came along to look at the hole in the ceiling, they already knew how they were going to spin this case because they were backed into it. So I think right away, in my opinion, they weren't part of a cover-up, but I think as the several weeks went on, they were actively covering up and covering for the people or the person or persons that did this. And so that's not a federal cover-up. That's not a CIA black op. That would be called a local or state-level cover-up, because they were taking, I think, orders from someone, and they were taking direction from someone to get this case closed, sealed, and wrapped up. And now what we have here is almost certainty here that you've got a guy named Sean Wright, who's more than likely a federal government agent of some sort, Eric Sayward, who's a government agent of some sort in the mix, and there may have been others that were government agents of some sort in the mix. If they, according to my personal opinion, if those individuals did go rogue and commit the crime all on their own, which was not a hit, although they were government agents and still are, it could be deemed that way. But I think that once they got caught up with all this and they talked to and discussed this with their handlers, whoever they report to, I think that's when the cover-up in earnest came to the Apple Valley, John Bermel and Reichgel to lay the hammer down to close this case up. I think that's where they got the direction from, those guys, who would not be state. They would be feds. They would be feds. So if the Apple Valley Police Department is given direction and handled and compromised to make sure this case finishes in a desired outcome that they wanted, I think that part was covered up, and that's why we see all this strange activity coming on later. But was this a wet work team by professionals? I think the answer is no. What are your thoughts?
Go ahead, Greg. I have a lot to say on this.
I will let you go, Catherine. Go for it.
Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah, please.
And I totally agree with what you're saying, Dan. It's like all of my research and everywhere that is pointing me, this was nowhere near a government hit. I don't buy that theory, and in my mind, it's not any place or anything the evidence has taken me. However, somebody going rogue or some form of jealousy, and it seems to be very personal. The damage done to these people is very violent, and it's close-up type of damage done, and that generally speaks to a very personal type of crime, a lot of anger and rage, And then I spoke with another coroner. I just wish people would go on the record, but they just will not. But again, I'm glad I found this book because nobody in there will go on record either. They just give their stories. And, also my experience, and I know that this coroner was telling the truth because I experienced similar things as an EMT. This particular coroner was telling me that oftentimes cases are determined between the police and the medical examiner from the get-go. They decide what they want to do, and they just call it. Hey, in their personal experience, it happened to have been a homeless person who was found dead in a motel room. And they get on scene, and the police officer and the ME, when the crime scene tech shows up, I guess sometimes they're called deputy coroners, sometimes they're called crime scene techs, whatever. Their job is to come in and investigate and get all the evidence. And when they showed up on scene and they see the body, and the police and the medical examiner like going, okay, how do you want to call it? And they said, we'll just call it suicide. And this person stepped up and said no. And they said, yes, that's what we're going to do. And they said, no. I'm writing up my report. You cannot convince me this person shot themselves in the chest 3 times. It's a murder. But because it was a homeless person, they didn't want to take the time to figure it out. So they wrote up their report, and it was eventually had to be labeled a murder because this one person was the standout. And so I'm wondering, sometimes because I question how long it took Dr. Lelinski to get there. 11 and a half hours is ridiculous. That is beyond comprehension. I mean, even if they were out of state or out of town, they could have called in their other medical examiners or the head medical examiner. They could have done something to get somebody there within a reasonable amount of time. So that leads me to believe that from the get-go, they had a narrative assigned. And then as things started to come into play, they have to backpedal. So in that sense, is it a cover-up, or are they just trying to cover their butts? I see it as they're trying to cover their butts. So they don't want to come out and admit, oops, yeah, we were kind of in a hurry. We didn't know what we were doing with only 7 murders that they had. And we don't even know if all of these people who investigated the Crowley case were the same officers on the other previous 7 in the last 13 years. Some of them, this could have been their very first experience with a triple homicide. And they have no clue. And so I see a lot of backpedaling and a lot of covering their butts and trying to explain, and when they can't, they go silent. Like, okay, we're not answering any more questions, and then they just don't talk. But as far as a government cover-up, I agree. I do not see that.
Now, the other thing that where I want to agree with you, Catherine, is they will tend to go silent, stop answering questions, put up a stone wall if they don't know, or if they're doing something that's not proper, that's what they'll do. Now, what we see here is the following year when the awards are given out, 2 officers are given the Officer of the Year, the Detectives of the Year, and the detectives as a unit all get merits of honor. So what we get is an overabundance of awards being handed out by this very same group who couldn't do anything, which leads me, personally, this is my opinion now, is when you start seeing awards being given out, usually those are types of things in exchange for silence. You're going to give a big promotion, someone's going to get promoted, or they'll be given an award at the banquet, something like that. Now, these guys, we know, slam dunk, without even having a background in investigations, that they bungled this thing up. Did they try their best? Maybe. but they certainly shouldn't have not have been given any type of award of commendation for all of their efforts. And by what we see in that 2015 award ceremony, or I think it was the beginning of 2016 ceremony, was not one, not two, but the entire department getting awards hand over fist. That's where I think is your dead giveaway, as far as you would not do that in a normal situation here where you have a half-assed run investigation to be given out those types of awards. Maybe one or two I could see, but what sealed it for me was when I saw the entire department all get awards, that I knew something was fishy right now. And then when I started seeing the resignations come after that, and then that kind of sealed it. So I do personally believe that there's a lot of people on that force who are not sleeping good at night.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah, by their silence. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, as I've told you before, I was a Red Cross volunteer as an EMT, and I did the vast majority of my work in military hospitals. And it's almost like the same thing. Anybody who screwed up, they got promoted. And people think it's a running joke, but it's actually what happens. The more you screw up, the higher you go. And so the fact that what you state makes a lot of sense to me.
And just to wrap that up too, not saying that it's a cover up per se, but being rewarded for your silence or being rewarded to keep your silence, it means to me one of only two things: that you were actively involved in something that was wrong, or you were covering up some inadequacies on your own behalf or the department's behalf, that you did fail, you did choke, you did screw up, and you did something not correct. All those things, to me, are bundled underneath the umbrella of not doing your job. Any type of covering your ass answer where you're trying to cover up there's something that you failed on is simply not doing your job. So whether you're involved actively in a cover-up or if you're not doing your job, either way, I don't believe that the citizens of Apple Valley, who are paying taxpayers paying for that department, are getting their money's worth, because I wouldn't be able to sleep good if I lived in that town. Because that police department's either covering something up or they're hiding their inadequacies. And either way, I find that one word: unacceptable.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Sounds like an occult to me. I mean, that's what they do. They cover their own group. That's why there's been questions about different groups there and everything, because it doesn't have to be a government hit. It could be a local hit. But to me, that a local hit and then a cover-up with that to involve people does kind of always lead me back into that same thing. But it's the backlash. It's really the backlash that we've all seen that really shows me that this is a program, and this is bigger than David Crowley. Something else going on here.
And I totally agree with you. I won't go into what's going on for me personally, but I will tell you I have never experienced stuff like this before. And I don't know where it's coming from. Again, I do not believe that it was a government hit, but there are things that are happening that shouldn't be happening. So who is behind it and why are they doing it? And I don't know if you, Greg and Dan, have to deal with the same thing. Like for, example, my house has been under surveillance. I have people who call me all hours of the night. I have people trying to hack my emails. I, of course, get slammed all over the internet, but you guys do too. And then something else I won't talk about, but stuff like that. And I have never experienced this ever until just recently. So that tells me that there is somebody out there who wants this to just go away.
Yeah, it's been a very spiritual thing for me, and I did not think that it was going to go down that route. But I don't know. There's just a very dark cloud, and from a spiritual point, it just gives me a bad feeling. But at the same time, it lets me know that we are close, and I do think we are getting very, very close. And I do think that as this group grows and as we get more people who are really researching this, I do think we are going to get there to the point where we can get it into the right hands of somebody who can actually get this case at least reclassified from a double murder-suicide. This is not a double murder-suicide. I don't care what they say. They cannot prove it, so it should not go down in the history books that this is a double murder-suicide. I'd rather see it as unknown as a cold case, because that's really more what it really is to me.
I agree. I'm not sure they can actually, at this point, maybe they can, depending on what they have that we don't know about. But, from the standpoint of what we see and where the evidence I look at, I'm not sure they actually could find the person who did this. So, yeah, cold case and it's sad to have it that way, but it's better than classifying someone as a murderer when they're a victim.
Yeah, it's also classified in the state of Minnesota as a domestic violence case as well, and David is in the record books as a domestic abuser, murderer. So all those statistics that get tracked really does not sit well with me personally.
No, not at all.
So how many, what are we up to on the petition, Catherine? Do you know have the latest count?
Let me go to the page right now. And as of right now, we have 277 signatures. I have not sent it to, I've got to get that done. I haven't had time, but I will get that together and send that to the person we've discussed, who said that they would put it out there on their YouTube page. I don't want to give the name yet until it's actually done. And this person, trust me, once they put it on their page, we will have thousands of signatures in a day. So I'm not too worried about that at the moment.
Yeah, and that's and one thing we do get for comments, I see coming from the newer members is a common comment is, how do you have 2,300 members on your page and only 200 signatures on the page? And what I try to do is give the people the response that of the 2,300 members we have, I think there's maybe 1,300 or 1,400 that are actually active on the page. And so actually signing a petition, they may come to the page sparingly. We've got, I think, 3 buckets of people who come all the time, every day, and some who come once in a while, and some don't come, at all. But I certainly think we'd have more than 200 signatures on a petition. But then again, I'm kind of a different person like that. I may sign 2 petitions a day on various things that come across my desk on the internet or on Facebook or something. So I don't do a lot of reading or research as far as before I go ahead and sign my name up for something. I know Greg is different, and his name has come up a couple times as far as not signing it. But I know Greg likes to read and do a full research before putting his name on a piece of paper. And although that didn't sit well with some people, Greg, can you talk to that a little more as far as your thoughts on various petitions that come across?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've never signed one.
Oh, okay.
I don't believe I've ever signed one. Ever. So, I mean, I'm all in favor of getting the case. I mean, if something like that, but it would have to be a very specific thing for me, and so it's just at the same time, I don't want to hinder other people. I don't want to. I feel like if I was to say anything, or it's just like I don't want to stand in the way of that. That's very important to me. So sometimes I just won't talk about it. I try not to go there. But it's not like I don't want to sign it because it's Catherine's or because I don't like something in there or anything like that. I just don't sign them.
Now on the Justice for David Crowley and Gray State group or page, that's got, I think there's 9,500 likes on that page, and that petition went out there as well, and we're still only at a couple hundred signatures. So, and the other thing is, maybe people don't want to throw their name on something. You can still sign it anonymously. Is that correct, Catherine?
I'm assuming yes, there is, because there's an anonymous one right here.
So I think you can sign it anonymous, but the fact that it's still, in order to put the petition out there to actually sign it, even though it's not shown in public, you still have to give your email address. And I think with the backlash that this case has caused, I also think people are hesitant on that as well. I mean,
well, there was also people that were talking about, there was, and because I haven't clicked on the actual link, but I did hear that there was an option to donate, and that some people were kind of like, well, what is this donate thing? I don't know if that's true, because I haven't actually.
Well, what it is, and since you've never signed a petition, is just about every petition you find, once you sign it, a page pops up, and it's asking for donations to their organization. So I've always told everybody, don't donate. This isn't about collecting money. This is just strictly about getting the names out there. And to me, it's like, I guess it all depends on perspective. Because some people are going, well, we only have, and I'm over here going, woohoo, we have 207.
I think it's great.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a great number. That's a great number. Polls haven't gotten that many numbers. That's a good number.
I'm very happy, because I was just thinking, 10, 20. If I could get 100, it would be great. But 277, I'm like super excited.
Yeah, and growing. Sure,
Yeah, so
that would be like.
Yeah, go ahead.
That would just to end that. That would be like free conference call. Like if I get everybody on free conference call, and then freeconferencecall.com tries to get everybody to like donate or something like that. You have no control over that.
Exactly.
Right.
And all you have to do is just close out of it. You don't. Do not donate. I tell everybody, don't donate. That's not what it's for. I'm not trying to support their platform. I'm grateful they're there, but I just want signatures.
Yeah, so that's all I've got. I don't know if there's anything else to discuss, but I need to jump off here in a few minutes myself. But I think we've covered some good ground tonight. If you guys want to stay on and continue to chat, but I will drop off. And when you're done, then just publish this up there, Greg, and I'll be looking forward to getting people's responses and comments to this. This is good. It's been a while.
Yeah, I think I'm done too. But I just want to say great thank you. It was great to finally get to talk to you. Yes.
It's been a long time coming. And I just want people to know that there's no, I consider you a friend. I think you are a believer in Jesus Christ. And to me, that's probably the most important thing here. So.
Absolutely. I am. I have a strong faith, and again, that's why, and I think this would probably be a good place to put this in. I've had several people come to me and ask me to get mediums or to put that out there, and I don't want to disrespect anybody else's belief. If they believe in mediums, that's great. I have nothing against them that do it, but I personally, in my personal belief system, I will not do that. And so please, everybody, I'm thank you for bringing that to me and sending me in emails and stuff. But Dan and Greg do it, and they have no problem doing that. So please contact them. And I hope I said that right. I don't want to sound condescending or judgmental, because that's not it. It's just a personal belief.
Yep, and that's a good point too, because I had made a couple posts about the medium that was used, I believe, in Texas, and I got some nasty folks saying, "Why are you posting this stuff? Because I don't think you believed in it or whatnot." And I said I was simply posting something that someone else did, or someone else went out and got a medium, did their research, and posted and compiled the results, and all I did was post it. And so I think people took the impression that I was endorsing this person or persons, or endorsing the industry, I guess you could say. But I've got no problem with that, and I'll certainly post things that people want to give to me. But they can't assume that it's me doing it. A lot of people are wanting to post things out there, they'll come to me on an instant message and say, I'd like to get some information out there. Could you please post it because I don't want my name or whatever out there. I'll certainly do that. But I'll usually head it off by saying this was given to me, I'm simply forwarding it, or I'm simply publishing someone else's work. So I don't get the credit for it, but it doesn't mean that I necessarily endorse it. And I did get some blowback from that on some of the Medium stuff for people who aren't into that or people that are into that. But I think in this case, personally, I'm open to anything. I'll gladly publish or post anything people want to forward to me, whether or not I believe it, just for the greater good.
Yeah, and so I always direct them to both of you. And again, I just hope everybody understands and I don't judge anybody, and if they do it or believe it, it's none of my business. I say go for it, do what you need to do. It's your life, it's your choice, and that's great. But for me, please, everybody, just direct those to both Dan and Greg, and I would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah. And anything else too? Any kind of questions or comments that anyone may have had, we're usually fairly responsive on returning messages. So it's all good.
Yep. Well, it's been great talking to both of you guys. This was awesome.
Yeah, this was awesome. We'll have to do it again.
Well, nice hearing from both of you guys. I need to jump off now, but it was fun. I look forward to reading people's comments once this goes public. So thanks again.
Great. Thanks, too. And I'm going to go ahead and jump off as well. So thank you so much.
Okay.
All right.
All right. We'll all chat later.
Okay,
Bye.
Yep.